Salem Witch Trials. Unsolved history, fear, and strange disappearances. Imagine a small town gripped by fear. Imagine neighbors turning against each other, families torn apart, and lives destroyed not by swords or battles, but by whispers, suspicion, and accusations. Now picture people disappearing from records, names fading into silence, and stories left untold. This is the haunting legacy of the Salem Witch Trials, an event that began over 300 years ago in 1692, yet still echoes with mystery, secrets, and unanswered questions. The Salem Witch Trials are remembered as one of the darkest chapters in American history. But they were more than just a courtroom drama about witches. They were a story of fear of the unknown, fear of losing control, and fear of evil lurking in the shadows. They were also about power, belief, and the strange disappearances that continue to puzzle historians to this day. But before we dive into the chilling events, let's set the stage. The year was 1692. Salem Village, in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, was a community of Puritan settlers. Life was harsh. Winters were bitter cold, food was never guaranteed, and survival meant hard work from dawn to dusk. These people were deeply religious, believing that the devil was not just a figure of evil, but a real presence that could tempt and harm them. For them, unseen forces were always close at hand. And yet, the people of Salem also lived with tension between families, disputes over land, and rivalries between church leaders. The village was split between those loyal to the wealthy Porter family and those who sided with the powerful Putnam family. Suspicion and bitterness brewed just beneath the surface. All it needed was a spark. That spark came in the household of Reverend Samuel Parris, the village's minister. His daughter Betty, just 9 years old, and his niece Abigail Williams, only 11, began behaving in strange, disturbing ways. They screamed uncontrollably, threw themselves into fits, and claimed invisible spirits were pinching and biting them. Their bodies twisted in ways that terrified onlookers. Doctors were called, but none could explain the symptoms. In a society that believed strongly in the supernatural, there was only one explanation that made sense to them: witchcraft. Soon, other girls in the village began showing the same symptoms. They too fell into fits, shouted strange words, and claimed to see visions of dark figures. Fear spread like wildfire. If the devil's servants were in Salem, then no one was safe. And in a world where women were expected to be silent, obedient, and pure, suspicion often fell on those who stood out. The first women accused were easy targets: Sarah Good, a poor beggar who often muttered under her breath; Sarah Osborne, an older woman who had scandalized the community by not attending church regularly; and Taitiba, Reverend Parris's enslaved servant from the Caribbean. These three women were dragged before the court. Under pressure, Tituba confessed that she had seen the devil, and what's more, she said others in Salem were working with him. Whether she confessed out of fear or because she was forced, no one knows. But her words lit a fire that would soon engulf the village. From that moment, accusations multiplied. Children claimed to see spirits in the form of animals: black cats, wolves, and yellow birds that belonged to the accused. Neighbors turned against neighbors. Some accused were respected members of the community, while others were outsiders. But once the finger of suspicion pointed at you, there was little hope of escape. The trials that followed were unlike anything we recognize as justice today. Courts accepted spectral evidence, the idea that if someone said they saw your spirit or ghost tormenting them in a dream or vision, it was proof enough to convict you. Imagine being sentenced to death because someone said they dreamed you attacked them. It seems impossible, but in Salem, it was reality. The hysteria grew. By the end, more than 200 people had been accused of witchcraft. 19 were hanged on Gallows Hill. One man, Giles Corey, was pressed to death with heavy stones for refusing to plead. His famous last words, "More weight," still echo through history. Others died in prison, awaiting trial in freezing, filthy conditions. But here is where the mystery deepens. Records show that not everyone who was accused faced trial. Some people seemed to disappear from history, names lost, fates uncertain. Were they quietly executed without being recorded? Did they escape into the wilderness? leaving everything behind? Or were their stories erased to hide darker secrets? Even today, researchers argue over missing documents and unexplained gaps in the record. There were also strange stories circulating during the trials. Witnesses claimed to see glowing lights at night in the woods around Salem. Some swore they heard eerie voices in the darkness, calling their names. Others reported seeing shadowy figures watching from a distance, vanishing when approached. Were these just the wild imaginations of a frightened community, or was something truly unexplainable haunting Salem? And then there is the question of why the girls accused so many people in the first place. Were they simply caught up in hysteria? Were they pressured by adults with hidden agendas? Or did they truly believe what they claimed? Some historians suggest the girls may have been influenced by stories Tituba told of spirits and magic from a Caribbean background. Others believe the children may have been victims of ergot poisoning, a fungus that grows on rye bread, which can cause hallucinations, muscular spasms, and delusions. If that theory is true, then the Salem Witch Trials may have been triggered not by the devil, but by spoiled bread. Yet others argue that the trials were more about power and greed than religion or sickness. Accusing someone of witchcraft often led to their land being confiscated. In some cases, neighbors gained property after the accused were executed. Was the witch hunt fueled, at least in part, by the desire for wealth and control? If so, then the Salem Witch Trials were not only about fear, but also about ambition and betrayal. Think about it, how many times in history have powerful people used fear to control others? Salem was a small village, but its story reflects a larger truth about humanity. When fear takes over, logic and compassion vanish. As the months went by, the hysteria consumed Salem. Entire families were accused. Even a former minister, George Burroughs, was accused of being the leader of the witches. When he stood at the gallows, he shocked the crowd by reciting the Lord Esprier. Prayer witches were supposedly unable to say. For a moment, people hesitated, believing he might be innocent. But the execution went on. He was hanged anyway. By 1693, the frenzy began to fade. The governor of Massachusetts intervened, disbanding the special court that had been created for the trials. Gradually, the accused were released. Years later, some of the accusers admitted they had lied or been mistaken. The colony officially apologized, and families of the victims were given compensation. But for those who died, it was far too late. And yet, the mystery of Salem has never truly been solved. Why did it happen? Why did ordinary people believe their neighbors were servants of the devil? Why were some names erased from records? And what explains the eerie stories of lights, shadows, and disappearances? Some say the answer is simple. It was mass hysteria, combined with politics, greed, and fear. Others believe there may have been darker forces at work, forces we still cannot explain. What do you think? Was Salem a tragic lesson in human fear, or was it touched by something beyond our understanding? Even today, Salem carries the weight of its history. Tourists flock to the town, visiting the old cemeteries, museums, and memorials. Ghost stories are told of restless spirits wandering the streets. The past lingers in the air, as if the voices of the accused still whisper their innocence. The Salem Witch Trials are not just history. They are a warning. They remind us of what fear can do, of how quickly it can spread, and of how dangerous it is when truth is twisted by panic. And they leave us with one final mystery. How much of the story has been lost forever, hidden in the shadows of time? So I ask you, what do you believe really happened in Salem? Was it fear, greed, hallucination, or something supernatural? Could it happen again today, in a world where fear still shapes so many of our choices? If you found this journey into history's mysteries haunting and thought-provoking, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more unsolved history, and share it with friends who love chilling stories from the past. And in the comments, let me know if you were living in Salem in 1692. How would you have survived? Would you have spoken out or stayed silent? Because in Salem, silence could mean safety, but it could also mean doom.